ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the IdeaGen Global Leadership Summit, live here at the NASDAQ. Today is all about leadership. And what's so exciting for me personally and professionally is to highlight someone who, when you turn to what would have been the dictionary, I guess it's Wikipedia or whatever it may be now, is the definition of leadership. A dear friend, a leader, and just someone who's an incredible human being, Peter Cuneo. Welcome.
George tends to exaggerate. I just want to mention that. You know.
Peter, you got to understand, I'm from Washington. That's what we do.
Oh, that's true. I forgot.
Well, so the introduction is factual. I like to talk about facts. And you are that leader. You have developed 32 rules of superhero leadership. We'll talk about.
It's now down to
28.
It's 28 now.
28. I'm sorry. I added rules. 28.
I just wrote a book, and it will be out in February 3rd, called Superhero Leadership, and a little bit of play of my time at Marvel, and I'm just thinking that you're very good to me. I want to thank you. Really. Very good to me. So,
Peter,
I might not charge a fee for this,
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Thank you for that.
Sorry.
No, look. You know what? It's about leadership is, we've talked a lot about peering around corners. It's about working with good people. How about that one? You like that one?
Well, it's pretty generic, but sure.
Okay. That's a generic rule. That's my rule. Work with good people. And so your new book, Superhero Leadership, lays out 28 ways to lead with, ready? Courage, strength, and compassion. That's what we're talking about here. Peter, which one of those traits do you believe are most lacking in today's leaders? And how do you see emerging leaders being able to cultivate them?
Well, first of all, if I could just backtrack a little bit.
Of course.
So what I do, I'm still in business. I'm chairman of 3 companies, one in Luxembourg, nanotechnology company. One is which I'm just going off of now, but a med tech company on the NASDAQ, and one is an AI company in San Francisco. So that is, in a sense, one side of my life. The other side is that many years ago, I became very concerned about the lack of leadership in the world. And I like to say we have less good leadership in the world than maybe ever in human history. I know, big statement, but, and that was years ago, and it's only worse now. And so the theme of what I do, which I'll run through very quickly, is that, but it's also a very strong sub-theme is young people are not learning leadership. And I'm defining young as age 5 to age 30. Why aren't they learning leadership? We need them desperately for the future. What can they do? What can their parents do? What can anybody do to encourage young people to learn leadership? And if we have time, we can talk about why and some of the things I recommend. So around that theme, I've been doing speeches around the world for over 20 years. And actually, the now 28 Essentials started my 3rd year as CEO of Marvel Entertainment. And I was asked to make a speech to a large group on leadership. And shockingly, now when I think back, I really had thought very little consciously about my own leadership, my style, what I had learned. I had a lot of adventures. I have the adventurer gene, I guess. And I had a nonstop flight to China, 11 hours before the speech. And I was nervous. I got on the plane. What am I going to say? And I sort of went into a trance for about 9 hours writing, going through my entire life practically. What did I learn? When did I learn it? And that's when most of the 28 Essentials, in 20 years, I might have added 3 or 4. That's all. And they are what I think are instincts, habits, attitudes. They take various forms. And so that really started me off. And then we have a podcast, Superhero Leadership with Peter Cuneo. We just finished the 2nd season. We're very happy with how that's going. We have the book coming out called Superhero Leadership in, right now, February 3rd. It's written, so I think we're going to make the date. I'm also working with a company called Summer Discovery, which runs summer programs at the best universities in the world for high-ability high school students. I want to get to them to help them think about leadership. We're talking Oxford, Cambridge, 5 Ivy League schools, UCLA, MIT, University of Madrid, and on and on. And students come from 80 different countries, and they have about 10,000 students in the summer. So I'm working on a pilot program on leadership, which will be out next summer. And then working again with another group called Studio.com. Some of you may be aware of it. It's a bit like Masterclass, but really more for a younger audience. And they saw me give a talk and said, we need you to, we need a leader. We don't have a leader, we need a program. So a lot going on the question of leadership and so on. And so I'm still, people still want to talk about leadership, which makes sense. It's, even if you don't aspire to leadership, it's a subject every human being is interested in. So the toughest of the 28 essentials, we call them essentials for superhero leadership. Number 18. Yeah, and that is basically says you have to make the emotional leap to understand that as a leader, and particularly when I've done 7 turnarounds, so it's particularly difficult, challenging situations. But in any leadership position, business, non-business, public, private, it doesn't matter what you're in. You have to be comfortable emotionally that as a leader, you're going to have to make some change at some point, and you're going to make people unhappy. And some of them will never see you any other way but a problem. And that is very hard for most human beings to do. That is the mantle of leadership. It's the thing you really need to accept. Yeah, you can make more money. Yes, there's some nice things about being an effective leader, but in the end, you can't be effective unless you are okay with, I don't want to abuse people. Of course not. But this change is going to be needed, and unfortunately, there's no way around it. Because if we don't, we may have everybody else out of a job that hasn't lost it already. So very, very tough. I can't look at all of you and determine which of you can make that leap, which can't. Some can make the leap when they're 10, 20, 30. Some need to be 50. Yeah, everyone is different. But that is the key, because leadership, the key word I always associate with leadership is courage. If you ask me one word, what is it? It's courage. Courage to make change. Try not to make people unhappy, but accept that no matter what you do, even positive change upsets human beings because it's change. I'm not going to be in that same cubicle anymore. You're moving me to a corner office. I'm upset. I want to stay in my cubicle. I've had that happen as an example. So it's not easy, and there's a lot of stress associated with it. You have to accept that too. Most human beings just don't want to be leaders because they don't want the responsibility of having to deal with other people. We all fundamentally, most of us, unless we're nuts, we all want to be loved by everybody, right? It's natural for human beings. But if you're going to be an effective leader, it's impossible. And that is you asked me what the biggest mistake was that I think, leaders, certainly poor leaders make. It's that. They never make that leap. They put off problems. They don't want to deal. Maybe it'll go away if I'm lucky. So
Isn't that human nature, though? Isn't it human nature to take the path of least resistance? So the courage to take that leap is what you're talking about, right?
Sure. So if you do a study, I'm on the board of the National Archives Foundation in Washington. The Archives keeps all the records of the United States government from day one. We have 22 billion documents, the largest collection of antique maps, the largest collection of film, the largest collection of photographs in the world. And being on the board, I'm in my 15th year, is you learn a lot about leadership. And if you go to my website, petercuneo.com, I do have a list of 15 things that I recommend for people to learn leadership. And most of them are all about face-to-face experiences, because I believe 90% of learning leadership is your personal experiences with a diversity of people, professionally, personally, internationally, talking about the UN, all of that. You learn the instincts of how to convince people to go your way, but it takes time. So I just think that it's a challenge, particularly for young people, but I do have that list, which I recommend. One of the things on the list is, which doesn't require face-to-face, is study history. And there's a lot of ways to do that. You can get a book, you can go online, you can go to museums, you can travel and go around the world, whatever it takes. There's a lot of lists. The past is prologue.
It's so incredible to hear, Peter, because you are that leader. On your Superhero Leadership podcast, which I encourage all of you to listen to, because it's Peter at his best, like today. You'll hear Peter talking to a range of global leaders, CEOs, and others that have been there, have done that, or are doing it. And I'd like to ask you, Peter, for the global audience, for the millions of people that will see, watch, hear this interview, what are some of the threads that you have found in these leaders? Like, what is that? I know you said courage, and that's important, because without courage, as they say, someone wiser than maybe we said, all of the other virtues are not possible.
I think you're probably right on that. Again, if you study past successful leaders, you see a number of things that in their behaviors that they all have. And one of them is they run at problems. They do not shy away from problems. They actually run at problems. Another thing you see is that they are very comfortable being thrown into or making a decision to go into an alien environment. Now, an alien in this case, I'm talking about different, not necessarily bad, but different. Alien environments come up in your life. Sometimes it could be business. And my first turnaround, my boss walked into my office and said, "Peter, you're going to take over the international division tomorrow. You're going to fly to London with me." I was like, "What?" And yeah, it's a big turnaround. I had no idea I knew anything, I had any skills in turnarounds. I was thrown into an alien environment. And I was depressed for 6 months until we started getting results, and I realized it was all about leadership and so on. So, or you work in New York, guess what? You just took a job in London. Well, you're going to go to an alien environment. It was your decision. Not a bad thing. But good leaders are very good coping with alien environments. And so one of the things that I see with our guests, and I will say that we have, if you go online, we did film season 2. So you can actually sit there for 40 minutes and watch two people talking to each other. I don't know who wants to do that, but apparently it's very popular. And season 1 was just audio. But our guests are some names you would know, but many you don't really know. But when you hear what they accomplished, it's pretty unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
And that's the idea behind it. But one of the things that I always ask is about their childhood. Tell me about your childhood. What was it like? I almost know what I'm going to hear. I mean, one guest said, I grew up in a trailer with 5 brothers. Another one said, my father had a lot of physical problems. I delivered newspapers when I was 10 years old, but I realized my first business, because I realized that if I actually didn't just throw the paper on the front step, but I actually rang the bell and said, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" People loved it. It's kind of 10 years old.
Incredible.
So what you see, though, when you hear these people talk is they had very unique experiences. They were challenged by life in many cases. They were not overparented, the opposite in most cases. We have a terrible problem with overparenting. This is one of the reasons young people are not learning leadership. So, you didn't make that elite soccer team? Oh, it's the coach's fault. I'm going to call the coach and tell him off or her off. Oh, you got a bad grade in school? Oh, it's the teacher's fault. It's not your fault. And kids never learn to cope. A lot of kids today, I hear stories from C-suite people all the time. I almost can't believe my ears sometimes on the problems with young people. First job, very well educated, and just amazing stories about that. They cannot handle, they're not thin-skinned, they have no skin. They can't handle the simplest setback because they were never faced with a setback growing up. So, but long-winded answer to your question.
No, it's incredibly insightful, and I think that it goes back to courage, right? And you develop that courage through adversity, through experience, through all of these things that I don't think you can be taught courage, is what I'm trying to say. Can you?
I don't know. I don't know. I think one of the things you also see is most of these leaders were encouraged to take risks, even at a very young age. Or they had experiences with a family or friends where they went into alien environments. A 5-year-old can learn leadership. Now, I used to say that to the audience, and all of you would be going like this. No way. My 5-year-old doesn't even know what leadership means. And what I explain is this. For your next summer vacation, go to Europe, to a country that does not speak English. Take your 5-year-old. And here's what happens. Of course, the 5-year-old doesn't know anything about leadership, but the emotional reaction, assuming it went well, and chances are it will go well, is, we went to this place, I forgot the name. I didn't understand anything anyone said. This is if you're an American, but I would apply this to anybody going out of their culture. And the food was different, but I liked it. Mom and Dad, where are we going next year? If you can't afford to go to Europe, and okay, not everyone can, go to Quebec. If you can't afford to go to Quebec, you don't have to leave the U.S., go to West Virginia. And let your kids see poverty. That's another important, I think for all young kids to know that there is poverty in the world and what that really means without having a terrible experience. Of course not. It's not what I'm saying. But the parents, very often of these leaders, provided those kinds of experiences, just naturally. In my case, I often say I had the adventurer gene, and it's really not, it's not anything organic. My parents were adventurers, and my grandparents, 3 of whom, of the 4, were immigrants. They were all adventurers. They couldn't sit at a desk. My mother was an EMT for 30 years. The last 10, because she couldn't do it physically, she was a dispatcher for the EMTs. She would come when I was in high school. She worked the 4 to 12 shift. She would come to my house and put me in the back with her. Now, we're going way back. This is before regulations. Could never get away with this. And I would go on calls, and it wasn't that I did anything because I wasn't qualified, but I saw my mother in action. I grew up with a working woman who had courage. And I'm not going to get into some of the graphic details of what I happened to see because I was doing that. My father was a lieutenant in New York City Fire Department. Canal and Allen Street here in Manhattan was his firehouse. Some of the worst fires in New York City, Chinatown. And he was, his men often told me he was one of the few officers that actually ran in the buildings to fight the fires with them, as opposed to standing out in the street and directing. My father was also in the U.S. Navy as an officer in World War II in Korea. My grandparents immigrated from Italy, Sweden, and Scotland via Nova Scotia in Canada. They survived. They got through the Depression. They were middle-class families. But they worked all jobs. They got out there. My grandfather and grandmother met in a fancy apartment house on Park Avenue, 903 Park Avenue, which is 79th and Park. And how'd they meet? He was the handyman, and she was running the elevator. Because back then, you actually had to have someone in the elevator to run it. And that's how they met.
Incredible.
They were downstairs, in a sense.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is what I grew up with. So it was, I went in the Navy to Vietnam. I'm a Vietnam veteran of 2 tours. A guided missiles destroyer of the Navy. I really went because my father's service. And I just thought it would be a big adventure. Admittedly, I was very naive when I think back. But when I really started to learn leadership was in the U.S. Navy in combat. And I was privileged to have experiences under some great Navy officers and senior enlisted men, Navy chiefs. And I learned leadership just by being with them, asking them questions, watching them in action. So,
Peter, thank you for that journey, because it's so important to understand who you are. And I think for our global audience to understand, first of all, thank you for your service to the United States, without a doubt. I think it's important to note that. Peter, you emphasize the importance of being human, honest, and accessible as a leader. How do you balance that openness with the need, the courage, to make such tough and perhaps unpopular decisions?
I actually think it comes down to communications. And the art of it's an art form. Communications is an art. And a lot of people have, in my world at least, have never mastered the art or realized how important it is. So I'm looking at you 3 ladies right now, only because you're in the front row. 50% of what I'm learning about you right now is your body language. 50%. I haven't spoken to you yet, of course. So, and if we were speaking, of the remaining 50%, 25% would be what you say. The other 25% would be how you say it. So I could probably tell if you really liked me or not up here if we have a conversation, regardless of what you say. So communications, and if you're a leader, you have to communicate honestly with people. People know there are problems. My experience with human beings is they feel better being told the truth, even if it's negative, than being in an atmosphere of total uncertainty. It's human nature. Okay, at least I know. I know what we're thinking, I know what we're trying to do. And so regular communications to as many, I like to be face-to-face as we are today, but if you're in a big organization, that's not always possible. But regular communications, consistent communications, saying the same thing to everybody. How many bad leaders have you met where what they said was whoever talked to them 5 minutes ago, that was their story? It could be different from the day before. It happens. Poor leadership, poor communications. Don't be afraid to communicate. I've done 7 turnarounds, and I came through the door very optimistic. I always try to show positive energy from the first minute through the door, but I never lied to people. If someone said, "Are we having layoffs?" I would tell the truth. Usually, because I was new, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Everyone's concerned about their existence with the organization, and God bless them, they should be. So I think being honest is very, very important. But, you're still going to have to make hard decisions. People will, I think, appreciate more, even that if a hard decision goes against them, if they knew, what was happening.
Peter, you talk a lot about something we all have heard and maybe think about from time to time, which is ego. How about ego? And the dangers, this is the key here, the dangers of the ego. Peter, can you share a time when setting that ego aside, right? I mean, how do you do that, right? You separate the ego and put it aside, where it changed your role as it related to a deal, the trajectory of that deal, or the organization?
Let me talk about Marvel a little bit.
Please.
Okay, so I showed up as CEO of Marvel. Marvel had recently come out of bankruptcy. It had been a very tough bankruptcy, 2 years. A lot of the good people in the organization had left because they were worried about the future of the company, and so on. And so I knew nothing about making motion pictures or publishing comic books coming through the door. And when I first got there, I thought I have to learn this very quickly, and so I can, be a force in this. And the reality is, as I got into it, that was my initial, if you will, ego talking. But honestly, as I got into it, I realized I was completely unqualified to have much to say about those 2 functions because I knew nothing. I read scripts. I read all the scripts. I think we made 14 films before we started our own started Marvel Studios. And I read all the scripts, but I never made or suggested a single change. I just didn't feel qualified. Film. One of the things that was already part of the culture, or starting to be, which I totally supported, was we were going to change the rules of the game for our business, not only comic books, but the way movies were made. We weren't going to follow a lot of the things that the big studios did. And we, in fact, did that. We viewed things differently. But we had some good people already, and they bought into, not we call it going Hollywood, not going Hollywood, and supporting things different. So the media would interview me and often try to give me credit for getting in the movies. But actually, the second week I was on the job, I went to Toronto. We were filming X-Men 1 in a mansion in Toronto. So that had already started. A guy named Avi Arad really pushed, was the father of Marvel really getting back into film. Marvel had briefly, many years before, been in film and not done well. But he deserves that, and we had a lot of other good people. I could spend the rest of the morning giving names of people who really, nobody like me is successful without good people. That often don't get credit because the media wants you to be a superhero or a super bum. That's the way they write things up. So I have to say, putting my ego aside, and I do take credit. I take credit for getting out of the way and letting them do their thing, and so on. I made very few decisions. We killed off Captain America for a couple of years, the decision I had to make because it was a big one. But the people in comic books told me when these characters come back, they're bigger than ever. And that's exactly what happened. So if those of you have seen the latest Avengers movie and saw that Iron Man got killed, don't grieve. Iron Man will be back. I don't have any inside information, but Iron Man is too valuable to Disney to be on the shelf
Whoa,
too long.
breaking news here, Peter. Breaking news.
No,
Iron
I
Man.
have no inside. And you know, Iron Man reminds me of a situation where doing things differently with the movies. So some years later, I was vice chairman of the board, and we restarted Marvel Studios. Prior to this, we'd been partnered with the big studios, and that had actually gone well. But now we're going to do it all ourselves. And there was a lot of concern on investors' part. One of my jobs as vice chairman was investor relations. And they were all saying, how can Marvel do what these big studios do? How can, you guys are crazy to start, you know, your own studio. And I would explain, no, why? Here's why. We can make the movies cheaper and better. Here's why. They just wouldn't buy it. So the first film we were going to do, it's now 2008, and it's Iron Man 1. And it needs to be a hit. And we had just raised $550 million to finance Marvel Studios, our own studio. And so we're having a board meeting, and the people running Marvel Studios say, we want the casting for Tony Stark as Iron Man is super important. Got to be. And we want to cast the #1 male actor in Hollywood. So I'm on the board. Oh, I like that idea. Who is it? Robert Downey Jr. Well, Robert's mugshot had been everywhere 3 months earlier. Some of you are not old enough to remember that. And so the board is like, what? Okay. I hope you weren't filming that. Okay, good. And so they said, we knew you'd think that. We did here's Robert's screen test. Normally a guy like him wouldn't. Screen test was unbelievable. And he became, I still think Robert Downey Jr. is Tony Stark. They have the same personal problems and all that stuff. No, I'm kidding. But Robert was amazing. He's still playing Tony Stark 20 years later. Of course, he's made all these other great films. Who won just the award for Best Supporting Actor? Robert. But that was an example of that changing the rules of the game culture. Nobody would touch him, frankly. I don't know for sure at that point. But we felt he was a good guy, a really good guy, and he would come around and boy, did he. So, I had to keep my ego in check when it came to Mr. Big Shot coming in and suddenly being as good as someone who's making movies for 20 years or writing comic books for 15 years. No.
Peter, what's clear is that next year we're going to have to do a day-long summit with just you because you have the 28 rules of superhero leadership, and we just can't possibly get through every single one. And I'm just like, it almost feels like a travesty. But I then encourage everyone to go to petercuneo.com to see I can't keep up with this guy. I feel like I have energy, but you're all over the place. You're on 3 boards, you're chairman of 3 boards, you're doing your podcast book. When's the movie coming out?
This is a completely different subject, but I've been working on one movie for almost 10 years now. It had nothing to do with Marvel, and I'm still trying to get it made.
Okay.
But there's lots of examples of movies being chopped for 15 years and finally getting
Sure
made.
is.
So, but that's really, I don't spend too much time on that one.
February 3rd.
Okay.
February 3rd. New book. Title of the book?
Superhero Leadership with Peter Cuneo.
Superhero Leadership with Peter Cuneo. February 3rd. Let's all try to pre-purchase. When's it going to be available for purchase, you think? Soon.
2 weeks before.
2 weeks before.
On Amazon.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we...
And I think the cover of the book is up on Amazon now, actually, as a watch out or something. I'm not sure, but yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. You are not only a leader, but you're a great friend and you're an inspiration. You inspire me every day, and I'm just grateful to you for what you've given to me personally and professionally in terms of the ability to understand what leadership is,
what it looks like, what it feels like, and the fact that courage is centered to all of it. Peter Cuneo, thank you so very much.
Thank you, George, very much.